Staff to David Cameron. Welcome both. Ken, I'm going to start with you because you actually featured in one of the sort of prominent tweets I saw today saying, is this the moment that Labour realised that actually it's not all a Ken Loach film, that there was such a narrow tunnel vision of what they were trying to achieve and it just didn't reach the country?
Well, I think you're right. A rather patronising remark, but I think you're right in that Labour didn't get its message across. It didn't get it, and it's disastrous because we've now got the biggest existential crisis humanity's faced with climate change, and it's being left to a bunch of free marketeers to sort out, and plainly that won't happen.
But you were backing, weren't you, a very divisive side of the Labour Party that were pushing a Corbyn agenda, and that hasn't reached out to the rest of the country. It made many Labour voters feel isolated enough to vote Conservative for the first time.
I don't think that's divisive, you see. To restore the health service to its founding principles is not divisive. To say the inequality is grotesque is not divisive, because it's wanting to remove that. It's saying that people are working in the gig economy 12, 14 hours a day to get a living wage, with no job security whatsoever. That surely can't be divisive.
So if it's not the message, was it the messenger? I mean, I'm asking you, if to you it seems totally reasonable and rational, the way you explain it, why did it not seem that, even in your heartlands?
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer totally. I think there are... Maybe Labour wasn't clear in presenting it. Maybe, and I think this is not whinging, but I think there are facts, is that the whole press, almost the whole press, was pro-Tory. And we can run through the papers, but we know them all. And they're owned by rich men who live abroad mainly and don't pay their taxes here. So the bias within the press is overwhelming. And I have to say, the BBC and the ITN generally were an echo chamber for that. So the agenda was taken from the press.
I'll be really honest, actually, Ken Loach, there was not a night where we didn't invite the front bench of Labour to come on and make their point with a generous amount of time allowed, and it was always up to them if they chose not to, and there were very few interviews with Jeremy Corbyn.
I think that's right. I agree with you on that. I think that was a mistake.
Would you call yourself a friend of Jeremy?
I've known Jeremy for many years. I don't see him that often, but certainly count him as a friend.
You haven't talked to him in the last 24 hours, have you?
No, I haven't. I'm a friend with John McDonnell, who I think is terrific, and I hope he stays.
What do you think, I mean, just knowing them as friends as you do, what do you think is going through their heads now? Sadness and anger. Anger that Jeremy has been, had a torrent of abuse. Every Labour leader's abused, but not to this extent. I mean, he's a man of peace who's been called a terrorist. He's been arrested against racism and being called racist. And these things are... So you think he feels victimised by the complaints about...
No, I wouldn't say he feels. I'm saying how it seems to many Labour people.
Right.
There has been a torrent of abuse which has been off the scale compared to other Labour leaders.
Do you mean abuse when people have pointed out his failure to get on top of anti-Semitism? Is that abuse?
I think there was no way anyone could, because I think it was a campaign that was going to run and run. There was
a campaign.
Absolutely. There was a text on one of the Twitter accounts that's been leading it, that where somebody, this is back in September, where the previous tweet said, why are we not making any further attempts on this issue? And the reply was, wait until there's an election, we've got all our ammunition there.
Let me understand that. So, are you saying it was an orchestrated attempt to make him look anti-Semitic?
I think that there were... I've got to be really clear here. There will be anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, as there is in other parties, as there is in society. But right at the beginning, and I quote Jewish members here, Jewish socialist groups said this anti-Semitism is being weaponised to undermine the Corbyn-led Labour Party.
Can I suggest that might not have been representative of the Jewish community as a whole?
Well, these are Jewish people. That's for you. That's not for me to say. This is a point of view.
Are you talking about Jewish Labour?
Yes, I'm talking about people in the Labour Party who are Jewish. Many people...
The one small group, Jewish Labour, was the one group that didn't...
I don't think there's a group called Jewish Labour. There are many people in Jewish Voice for Labour who speak and say this is not our experience. Now, I would defer to them. It's not my position to say. But deferring to them, there are many people who struggle to be represented on television. And so I think... But I don't think this issue should cloud everything. I think what we are left with today is the great inequality, the great poverty, the increase in food banks there will be. 130,000 kids homeless this Christmas, like last Christmas.
So you would
that's a tragedy. What has happened is a tragedy for them, and I weep for them.
Should the next Labour leader be head of a socialist movement?
Well, it's defining the terms. I think the elements of the elements of the policy are there to be are popular. So
Joe, you want to come in? Sorry.
So I don't think that's...
I mean, there's been widespread sorrow by and from Labour MPs who were returned and those who lost their seats. Do you think that the responsibility for this catastrophic defeat for Labour does lie squarely at the door of Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell and those that put that manifesto together?
Absolutely not. I think remember, we are the biggest party in Western Europe, the biggest political party.
In terms of members?
In terms of members. And so I think, and this was a very popular manifesto.
So it was a huge party that people in this country chose not to vote for?
No, it was a manifesto that was popular in 2017.
But you lost in 2017.
Yes, but it had a massive increase in the vote, as you know, in 2017, didn't it?
But you lost in 2017.
Yes,
you lost even.
But it had a massive increase in the vote, is what I'm saying. So it was not unpopular. And tell me which of the social programme would be unpopular? Restoring the NHS, building houses for the homeless.
So why didn't people vote for it?
Well, you tell me. You're the pundits. You asked me if the policy was unpopular. I don't think. If you break it down point by point, I think it is not unpopular.
The point that Alan Johnson made overnight was that Labour couldn't come along and just offer free things. It was a patronising offer, just to say, here's a bit of broadband, here's nationalisation, here's this, instead of offering something that was a newer vision. Do you accept that?
I think it's a new vision. I think maybe the priorities were not clear. I'd accept that. And I think that is a fair point. But the main planks of the policy are sound.
Let's bring in Ken Loach. Sure. Let's bring in Kate Fall, Baroness Fall. I wonder what the Cameristers are thinking about all this tonight. Is there a sense of how did Boris Johnson pull that one off?
I think we're proud of Boris Johnson for an incredibly impressive victory. I mean, it really is. And all victories build on previous victories. I mean,